Rental cooling off period after signing a residential lease agreement in Canada. After signing a residential lease agreement in Canada, there is no law that allows for a tenant to automatically back out without penalty for cooling off. As soon as a lease is signed, it becomes legally binding, and both the landlord and tenant must comply with its terms, including the fixed term or month-to-month rental agreement. In general, you cannot change your mind or withdraw from a lease after signing unless both parties agree or the lease explicitly allows it. Tenants who wish to end a fixed-term tenancy early are responsible for the remaining rent or until another tenant is found. There are, however, circumstances in which a tenant can end a lease early, such as by mutual agreement with the landlord or in specific cases like domestic violence. The following is a more detailed explanation. 1. There is no automatic right to cancel, no cooling off period, no statutory right. Means there is no legal right granted by a specific law. There is no general cooling off period for residential leases in Canada to automatically cancel a lease agreement after signing, unlike some other types of contracts. 2. Legally binding contract. Signed leases are legally binding contracts in Canada, which bind both tenant and landlord to uphold their terms. 3. A mutual agreement to terminate early, although there is no cooling off period. One way to terminate a lease early is to reach a mutual agreement between the landlord and tenant, usually in writing through a landlord and tenant board form. 4. Situations that are specific. In certain circumstances, such as domestic violence or sexual abuse, a tenant may be able to break their lease early. 5. Assignment or subletting. Leases may be assigned or sublet to another person with the landlord's approval. 6. Tenant's notice. According to the Landlord and Tenant Board, tenants who wish to move out of their rental unit must give their landlord proper written notice, such as the N9 form in Ontario. A fixed-term tenancies. Typically, they last for a certain period of time, such as a year. A tenant wishing to terminate a fixed-term lease early may need to give 60 days notice, and the termination date may have to be the last day of the rental period. An agreement is required for early termination. Those who want to leave before the end of their lease need to either have an early termination clause in their lease or reach an agreement with their landlord to do so. Taking financial responsibility. It is possible that a tenant breaks a fixed-term lease without proper agreement and is responsible for paying the remaining rent, unless the landlord can re-rent the unit. B. Month-to-month tenancies. To end a tenancy, 2 months, 60 days of written notice must be given before the rent due date of the month in which the tenancy is to end. And the termination date must be the last day of the rental period, typically the end of the month, in the event that the tenancy is converted to a month-to-month or week-to-week arrangement. For example, in Ontario, the standard notice periods will apply: 60 days for monthly, 28 days for weekly. 7. Mitigation duties of landlords. In case of early termination, a landlord is legally required to try and find a new tenant to minimize their losses by advertising the unit and arranging viewings. And the tenant may be responsible for rent until a new tenant is found. 8. In case of a change of heart after signing, unless there is a specific clause in the lease or a legal reason for terminating the lease early, a tenant who terminates a lease before its end date is responsible for the remaining rent. In summary, 1. Legal advice should be sought. In the event a tenant considers breaking their lease, they should consult a lawyer who specializes in residential tenancy law if they encounter difficulties or need to understand their rights and obligations. 2. Communicate with your landlord and reach a mutual agreement. Tenants in Canada can end their lease early by reaching a mutual agreement with their landlord. As part of this process, you will need to speak with your landlord, explain the situation, and discuss signing an early termination agreement. 3. Consider other options. Your landlord may be willing to negotiate a termination agreement with you if you find someone to take over the lease, sublet, or assignment. Thank you. Subscribe to HAGHER Media on YouTube for more resources.